Alright, Master Mason note, everybody, get on that stick. Running hard today. Got a nice clean bay. Rock's running good. We're about at that half-a-day system right now where we can, short of veneers and everything like that goes with it. We're doing awesome in here, but I did want to talk about some Facebook stuff. A lot of times you see AI, Python, learning. Well, that's a Python saw. Now, I don't specifically do that saw. That is not my main designated area, but you'll get into sequences like that and things like G code and M code and things like AI learning. Python is the word of the higher M2 matrix essentially, and you'll get into a lot of Excel. This stuff all makes really good Excel stuff. Like, I know especially when you're a finisher, it's like you got different patterns, you got all the sizes, keeping all your counts, and how that through parentheses on Excel is essentially a way of describing G code and M code at its most rudimentary, or at its most fundamental base. Away from that, there's some special programs that say, all right, instead of using G equals the square root of M1, M2 over R, we're just going to say that's F plus X in square root X plus 1, X plus 2, X plus M, X plus N, variables where it's really only applied in that method or in that model where I need X plus something, a constant, a time ratio, a dollar bill number, where against standard calculus, plus 1, that's one of them right there. In your school systems, to say essentially the school system for calculus is Python learning. That's how you learn from them saws. That's a Python. That's the name of that saw. Now essentially, again, marshmallow in here, our goal is to capitalize on that. Now the uppy downies that make that do that correlate to treads, not just uppy downs. There's up, down, red, blue, red, blue. Standard model means always 12. So if you're going to adjust over to 14s, it's always blue shifted with the cut coefficient number. Now you don't necessarily need it from there unless you're like these guys way past all that. Like, just by friction and variation on the number, you know what those numbers are rationally. Somebody's just going to walk through and be like, no, 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 no. And relative to that, there's a lot of times we're feeling that out in the scientific process of, well, if you don't have the numbers, you can't calculate. If this box is different in some way by the vacuum pressure than the one next door because this one's got a strap crane, then all your air times are different. You can't necessarily correlate or calculate directly without some level of X plus X here. Time systems, where that's compensated for that, where you could say on a fair test, thermaler A and thermaler B are compensatable ratio via Harvard or Princeton. I mean, the test should be the same 7 miles, but this one's talking about 14 and this one's talking about 16 and some integrated hub of, well, that's this turbulent flow into Euler's number in mathematics on this one. So it brings up a big topic. I've been around enough where I've worked just about all the equipment. For me, I'll run rock. Somebody tells me to jump, it's just the money. That's the move. So you get into some stuff about, well, somebody taking advantage of you or not, and again, you have to go back to calculus, because if you didn't do the action, then you have no reputable physics, no camera, no cut coefficients, and an adjusted number if things should get stupid. But for the most part, you got to look at that and say, realistically, this is a saw. For building A to building B to job A to job B, this is cutting rock. It could be philosophy, or it could be thermalin, it could be something else. And, well, I mean, in an operation like this, remember, this is still one constant net force. This is still one constant net pump. It might take 4 guys to run an operation behind this, but the timeline of the sequence of how correct those actions need to be inside of there really relies on that skill and years of experience and doing that stuff, where you might have a higher volume on a younger back or somebody who's in the training phase to stage 2 rocket into something like that when timelines become more appropriate. Like, you'd have to look at that and say, well, is that a 5-year chip? Is that a 5-year Apache to master mason to be able to fly an Apache, you're going to have like 5 years. Most drill sergeants are going to have to go at least 5 years through the basic system, private first class, so on and so forth, bar guy, corpsman. You're going to have to be close to one of those things at some point in time, because the overall job relies on you having the full understanding of all of those positions. So you'll get a lot of that experience through a lot of stonemasonry stuff like that. But remember, we have to X that out. I could say I know the fundamentals. I could say I know tread rock, but that doesn't mean, given people, places, stations, speed lines, techniques, and variables, that it'll always make the adjustment turn over. Sometimes that there are X, Y, and Z on that differential, which you got to take in consideration. But yeah, it's generally going to be the same process between 12s, 14s, 24s. There might be some weights and some very specific things that you do different, pallet setups, how it comes in and integrates, but this technique to that technique, or however you're going to do it, is still basically the same job. Again, we're just profiling Euler's number against the time paradox, time dilation, diversified inconsistency, because otherwise run the rock, switch that off to another one. And that might be the right idea, given, a rock that's got some junk in it, switching out orders. That's the easiest way to transition it. We tried it this other way by the science, didn't work. Tried it this other way when the event happened in front of you some way, it worked. We tried that again, it consistently worked. And every time, not to say that I couldn't improve the engineering of any secondary option, but to that original standard, unless there's a reason why that's shifting across the board, you don't generally go changing things. Big time scales. I mean, it's not gravity determines some things about price and standard, even if it's corn or water. It's in a space, it's in a time. How the distance correlates to you and timelines changes the value. If you're in a desert and have bottled waters or a handful of diamonds every mile, eventually you take enough diamonds till you have enough and it doesn't weigh you down, and then you start picking water more consistently. If you go water first and you get to the end, you missed all the diamonds. You try to range it in the middle, trying to space it out is very dynamic, not necessarily wrong, but you would have to have some form of calculus. I added more weight, I went a certain distance. As I add more weight, I lose that distance. If the bottles don't correlate to every other jump like that, then I die. And if you die, almost in here, Barry out back with the rest of them. Fucking rust in peace. We'll keep moving. Let's go. Hit that stick. No, we'll say a few words about you. I don't know if you like them or not, but